I remember in a TV interview some years ago, Tony Blair being asked which interviewer did he fear the most. And I distinctly remember him saying, I can't remember the exact words, but I remember the interviewer he said, and the reason. He said, David Frost, because he makes you feel comfortable, and before you know it, you're telling the truth. Now, Frost had his big scoop early on in his career with Nixon, and Nixon spilling the beans about Watergate. And I remember when I was younger, Robin Day, he used to get under politicians' skins and get them to say things they didn't always want to. And now, ever since those two, what interviewers do is they sort of goad people. And sometimes you think, no, you're just goading. You're not really getting to the bottom of things. You're just trying to trip them up to say something silly. And so maybe you're different, maybe I'm petty, but I do quite like it then when the interviewers get tripped up as well. Now, Jesus keeps on doing this to those who come to him with questions. They're trying to trip him up, and it's just not as straightforward as that with Jesus. He's the master at answering questions and asking them as well. Now, we learn a lot from Jesus and how he does this, but there's some ways we can't copy him because we're not Jesus. But what he does is he gets the question behind the question, and he answers the question as well. We saw this a few weeks ago. We've been actually thinking about this sort of thing in the impact group. And he does so again, but he makes a rather different point this week. And what he does is he exposes the questioner's hypocrisy. And as he does so, he challenges actually everyone, not just them, but all of us as well. So the question shows us that the world is hostile to God, and the answer shows that God has the rightful claim over everyone. That's what this shows. So that's what we're going to look at, that question and answer. First, we'll look at the question. So the question shows that the world is hostile to God in verses 13 to 14. Now, to our modern ears, sometimes when we say that, it sounds a bit rough. It sounds a bit over the top, like overstating the point. But the idea keeps popping up in the Bible, especially in the Gospels, that the world's default position is hatred towards God. Now, persecution doesn't happen everywhere, doesn't happen everywhere as badly, but the default position is hatred towards God and therefore to his people. Notice verse 13, this is a trap. It's not a sincere question. They're not concerned about the truth. They're concerned that Jesus is trapped. We mentioned Guerrilla Christian on Monday, and it went pretty well. There were one or two questions that I just wondered if they had that vibe about them, that you don't really want me to answer this. You want me to annoy one half of the room or the other. It's hard to tell, but that's not uncommon in some questions that Christians get asked. They don't really want an answer. They want to show either that you don't know the answer or that it's going to annoy other people in the room. Now, why is this a tricky question? Well, if you look at verse 14, about midway through verse 14, teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion. You are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not? So that's the question. Now, at the time, as you probably know, Judea is under Roman occupation, and they had to pay a poll tax. That's actually the name for it. I guess poll tax is never massively popular. This was very unpopular. I mean, who likes to pay tax anyway? But it's a very unpopular tax, and many Jews, a great many Jews, actually thought it was morally wrong, not just to be charged the tax, they thought it was morally wrong as a Jew to pay the tax. And the reason is because it's God's land. This is Judea. It's God's land. It's not Caesar's. He's got no right to be there, so he's got no right to charge taxes. And also, the coins with which they pay the taxes has Caesar's image on it and an inscription about him. And he claimed, all the Roman emperors claimed, some kind of semi-divine status. So most Jews, if not all, would have viewed the coin itself as idolatrous. And certainly giving it to the emperor is a part of pagan worship. It's idolatrous. So for those reasons, it's wrong to pay the tax, many thought. Now, all of the groups that are speaking to Jesus here did not think that, or the vast majority thought they should pay the tax. That's not the point. The point is they're trying to trap Jesus. Doesn't matter what they think. If Jesus says, yes, you should pay it, then he's going to lose massive support. He's not going to be very popular. Most of the crowd will leave him at that point, they assume. And that means job done. His ministry sunk. Also, it exposes him. With the crowd gone, then he's open to arrest, which is what they want to do. They want to get him on the cross. But if Jesus says, no, don't pay it, that would be wrong, then the Roman authorities would arrest him for stirring up rebellion and whatever the consequences of that would be. So Jesus has no way out, it seems. But we'll get to that bit in a second. So just two observations about the question. Firstly, who asks? And secondly, how they ask. So who asks? Verse 13, it says, they sent Pharisees and Herodians. So who is the they? It's not very good grammar, is it? But you know what I mean. Who's the they here? Well, if you keep on tracking back through the conversation, we get back to chapter 11, verse 27. The they we're talking about is the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. So then there's a sort of a dialogue and interactions through the rest of chapter 11 and 12 to this point. So that's who the they are. So the priests, the scribes, and the elders, they make up what's called the Sanhedrin, who run the temple. And they're mostly, their theological outlook is what they called the Sadducees. So that's the they. So the Sanhedrin, they send the Pharisees and the Herodians. So the priests, scribes, and elders send the Pharisees and the Herodians. And this is where it gets interesting. The Sanhedrin were at odds with the Pharisees. The Pharisees, would it be fair to say they're like us? They'd be like evangelicals or conservative Catholics or something like that. They take the Bible seriously and they believe in the application of the Bible. They believe in taking the rules seriously and living it out consistently through your whole life. And they believed in everything that you're meant to believe in at that time. So they believed in heaven and hell. They believed in angels. They believed in the resurrection of the dead. They believed in the Old Testament. They believed in lots of other things as well. The Sadducees didn't. So they believed in just the first 5 books of the Bible. They did not believe in angels. They did not believe in the resurrection. You know the joke. So if you get muddled up between your Pharisees and your Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection. That's why they're sad, you see. That's how you remember it. That's how I remember it. And you get this in churches, don't you? In denominations, so older denominations, more established churches, you often have the church establishment, the people in charge of the finances of the denomination, are at odds with the sort of the renewal movements in the denomination. So this group take the Bible extremely seriously and that their roots as a denomination very seriously. And these ones where they want everything run properly, but they perhaps cut loose a bit. So that's the Sadducees and the Pharisees. But also you have the Herodians. Well, they don't care about religion at all. They are political brokers. They supported Herod, who is reigning, but he's a puppet king of the Romans. He's not a Davidic king. He's not the proper king of Israel. They want to keep the Romans sweet. And all these debates between the Sadducees and the Pharisees about which bits of the Bible are our canon, which bits do we believe in angels? What about the resurrection? They didn't care about any of that. It seemed very trivial to them. And then the religious people, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, they wouldn't have had much time for the Herodians. Probably viewed them as traitors. They're missing the whole point of what being in the land is about. It's about God. Now look at verse 13. And they sent to him some of the Pharisees and some of the Herodians to trap him in his talk. They sent the Pharisees and the Herodians to trap him. Do you see how Jesus is a unifying figure? Jesus brings unity to the whole world of those who hate him. He brings those who hate him together. And that's true today. Now, then look at how they ask him. We looked at this a second ago in verse 14. They came to him and said, "Teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances, but you truly teach the way of God." And then they question. Straight away to us, I slightly emphasized it, but nonetheless, even as you read it, it doesn't sound sincere at all, does it? It sounds like they're crawling to him. And you know that their motive is to trap him, and they go, "Oh, you're brilliant, you are," in their question. But it also begs the question as they ask it, what's it saying about them? Well, it says the opposite of them, doesn't it? But then they're concerned about the crowd's opinion. They're only concerned about appearances. That they are, in fact, very easily swayed. They're not concerned about the truth and what God says. So their question exposes them. They're not concerned about the truth, and they are hypocritical. Now, a couple of things to consider from all that. First, about the questions that we both ask and answer. What lays behind them, really? If you're not a Christian, it's great to ask questions, but it's good to ask, what is your question really about? What is the answer that you're actually looking for? And Christian, I guess the same. We have questions and we're invested in the answer before we hear it and know what it is. But as we listen out and as we ask of ourselves or of someone else asking us, what is the real question as far as we can work out? And then notice that we are to expect this. Opposing factions with contradictory, irreconcilable differences will be united against Christ and his church. Without Christ, they'd be undermining each other. They'll be pointing out their contradictions. They'll be showing how stupid each other are. It may even get violent. But Christ unites them against him and therefore his body, at least for the time being. Eventually they'll turn back on each other. The world is not neutral about Jesus. It's not neutral about God. It's not neutral about the church. It's kind of indifferent about the church when we're not doing much. I mean, it's not neutral. And Christians often seem shocked by that and surprised by it. And we shouldn't be. The natural default is God hatred. And we keep seeing that in the Bible. And we keep being surprised. The second thing is Jesus' answer. That shows that God still has a claim over all of us in verses 15 to 17. Jesus' answer is genius level. He will not fall for their trap. And he answers their question. And he exposes their hearts and all of our hearts. And again, it feels like it's a binary question, but then he flips it. He asks for a denarius. He asks for a coin. The fact that someone then has, that he asks, and that someone has one ready, suggests that it's going to be in regular, normal currency. And he asks whose image and whose inscription, whose name is on there. And they say Caesar. And so the idea here is that the Roman coins belong to Caesar. He owns them, and he can then recall them in demanding tax. But also, like if you look at one of our notes, it's a promissory note. It says, "I promise to pay the bearer," so on. So it's just a bit of whatever it is, plastic now, but it resembles something that lies behind it. And so there's a sense in which Caesar is underwriting the transaction. He gives the coin its value. Look what Jesus says in verse 17. Jesus said to them, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they marveled at him. It's his, give it to him, Jesus says. But there's a double-edged sword, double-edged to his answer. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Give to God what is God's. Now, it's not really about the state-church divide or the relationship between how church and government relate. There's a lot in the Bible. You'd have to look to get that, but it informs it for sure. But it is about right authority and who has authority over who where. So even a godless state can ask for tax, even if it's going to be unpopular, unjust, and poorly spent. Of course, I mean the Romans. Any comparisons you make with contemporary governments is coincidental. But I heard certainly when as a student, and I've heard it since, Christian leaders say we should not pay this tax or that tax because they're not just. It's not your call, Jesus says. We pay our taxes. There might be ways we can do it efficiently, but we don't do it illegally. We pay what's our due. But, and this is where he really turns it, you give to God what is God's. So the coin had Caesar's image and his name on it. So what has God put his image on? And the answer, is every human ever. Now, especially when we think of his church, we thought about this in the evenings the other week, is at baptism, God has put his name on you. So every human is in the image of God. Every baptized person has got the name of God on them. So Jesus is claiming here that God owns all people because he made them and they're in his image. He owns them. So like Caesar's coin, God can make claims on them. He can recall them. He gives them their worth. So they thought their question would trap Jesus, but the crowd, trap Jesus between the crowd and the Roman authorities. And it doesn't. Instead, they're now trapped and exposed because Jesus is not usurping Caesar or undermining their traditions, but it means that the questioners are usurping God. And notice this comes on the heel of chapter 12, verses 1 to 12. It's Bible maths, isn't it? Verse 13 comes after verse 12. So what we looked at previously was the parable of the vineyard, in which God's the owner, Israel are the tenants, and that God has these rights. And they say, no, we're going to be in charge. And in the end, God boots them out. And so here it's moving on from that. Similar idea, but God here is the king. He's the emperor. He's the Caesar. God is in charge. He is the owner. And all of humanity is his and rightfully belongs to him. So just as they had to pay their tax to Caesar, and we have to pay our tax to HMRC, we also owe God. And the question then is, what do we owe God? Is it a tithe or a period of time? And the answer is, well, what do I have that has God's image on it? And that is myself, yourself. So what does offering ourselves look like? Well, it's nothing short of everything, because he demands everything. So it's not about giving a percentage of our income, because it's all his. Now, we give what we think is right. It's what we do when we take the collection as part of our worship. So we think before God, what is it that I should be giving to church and such like? But actually, all of our money is his. We're to honour God with all of our money. It doesn't mean you never have fun, buy anything for yourself, but you think, how do I honour God with the fun things that I buy? Our time, come to church and so on, well, that's great, but all time is his. Don't waste our time. Now, part of what we need to do in our time is actually we need to reset and such like. But all of our time is God's time. Our body, all of our body is for God. It matters how we use our bodies. Our family, our relationships are to honour him. And at times that may be by showing a non-Christian friend or relative how we prioritise the Lord, how we honour them and concerned about them, but they fit in with God in our life. God places us in a world with many things to enjoy, but in every choice we make, we consider, how do I honour God here? So Jesus is the master at hearing the real question and flipping it and We don't have his level of insight, but there's things we can learn from him. But notice, to finish on this incident, to listen to the actual question and ask more. And what is the question behind the question? What lay in our own questions? And be warned that from what we see here, to be warned that the world is not generally positive or even neutral about Jesus. It hates God, often it hates the church, especially if we point out our existence points out an awkward truth for them. To the point that contradictory, irreconcilable groups will unite against Jesus. But notice that God is the rightful owner over all people, and we therefore owe him all worship, honor, and praise with every area of our life. But like someone evading tax, we've not done that. And that's why Jesus had to come. That's why he had to go to the cross, ultimately for us, to pay what we had not paid. We saw that in the parable of the vineyard, that on the cross, he was the one that cast out, so that we won't be cast out. And we need to receive that gift and then take up our cross, follow him, and offer our lives.